sell my soul for this book. And I just don't like being told what to do. Nathan? I don't think his name is Nathan. My mind just did a complete 180 on me and I couldn't remember. I wish I would have DNF'd this book. Hello lovely bookworms, I'm Esmay from Paradise of Pages on Instagram and also on Twitter, and welcome to a new video. Today once again is going to be more of a cozy kind of video, hence why I'm sitting in a different spot. I also have to say that during the winter months the lighting is a lot better closer to my window opposed to closer to my bookshelves. So I'm sitting in this setup. I hope that you enjoy it nonetheless. You can see my bookshelves, you can see a bit more of my classics because it's actually my classic shelf up here. And I thought I would do another round of my recent reads wrap up. These are books that I've read I think throughout the months of November and December, and maybe one or two from October. I've basically picked out the more interesting ones because there's a couple of smaller ones that I've also read, but considering that would make the list very big, I thought I would do sort of the interesting books and talk about those. I do have to say that from this year onwards I'm going to plan on doing a wrap up every month because I'm now also keeping track of my statistics and seeing how many books per category I read, kind of thing, so which genres, the formatting, that kind of stuff. This is definitely inspired by the idea that G from Book Roast actually put out. I'm going to be using her call pile as well, and I've made my own monthly stats. So I'm going to use her call pile extended edition, the 3.0 I think, which I will link down below, to track my yearly reading. And then I'm going to be making monthly pie charts because I think those are interesting to show you my books. I won't have that for this one yet, but when we do my January wrap up I will have pie charts, statistics at the beginning of the video. So the first book I have here, which I think is also the book that is the longest ago, I think I read this in October, is A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. This is the first book in A Darker Shade of Magic series. There are 3 books in total. The next one is A Gathering of Shadows and I haven't started that one yet. But in this one we basically follow multiple characters, but I think the most predominant ones that we follow are Kel and Lila. My mind just did a complete 180 on me and I couldn't remember. But we follow Kel and Lila. In this story you have 4 different types of London that are sort of stacked on top of each other. And Kel, as an Ontari, I think that's what they're called, is able to move between the different types of London. And you have Black London, White London, Red London and Grey London, also in that order, and Kel is from Red London, so that's somewhere in the middle. Black London has been overtaken by magic and has been destroyed. White London has a lot of magic, where magic kind of is in control of people. Then you have Red London that does have magic, but it works really well together, and Grey London is a London that doesn't have as much magic. And we follow the story of Kel, who meets Lila and a couple of others on his journey to make sure that an artifact that made its way from Black London over to Red London into Kel's possession is destroyed. And that's the main premise of this book. I think it's really interesting. I love the idea, and this is one of those types of urban fantasy that I like, which is mostly fantasy, a little bit of urban because of the fact that it is in London, and I really enjoyed it. I hope I can finish this series this year. Next up is actually a book that I read on audio, and that is Across the Greengrass Fields by Shannon Maguire. This is the 6th book in the Wayward Children series, and this follows a girl that goes onto a place called the Hooflands. She basically is a character that, from what I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, has both the X and the Y chromosome, but she has all feminine physical traits. So she is a woman but has the male chromosomes, if I remember correctly, which I think is really interesting. I think it is good that we have that representation in books, and I feel like in this book it also sort of enhances the feeling of you are perfect the way you are, which is really true. I really enjoyed it. I think it is one of my least favorites though in the series, and that's because of the fact that just the world that she found herself in wasn't my favorite. nonetheless, I still gave it 4 stars, so I really enjoyed it. It's just not in an absolute dream good, which got 5 stars, so really enjoyable. Then I have The Wolf and the Woodsman by Ava Reid. This was our book of the month for November for the Enchanted book club, and I think none of us really enjoyed it. I think Sasha DNF'd it, or she finished it and didn't enjoy it. I think one of us DNF'd it and then the others were just lackluster at best. I think Jane and I gave it about like 2 to 3 stars. It was an okay book, but it was nothing special, so to say. Basically, we follow a girl who's taken from her home, who is in the place of another. There's these wolfmen, or woodsmen, sorry. The woodsmen, they wanted a seer, and this village that our main protagonist is from, they didn't want to give up their seer, so they gave up the main protagonist, and that's sort of where the story starts. There's all kinds of different things in here, and quite frankly, I don't remember that much because it just wasn't that everlasting of an impression on me. I would say it's an okay book. I think I gave it 2.5 stars because of the fact that it was an okay book, but I didn't really enjoy it, so it's not quite 3, but it's not quite 2 because it's not a book that I hated. So 2.5, not great, not awful, mediocre. Next up, I have my very first contemporary romance of this list, and mind you, there's quite a few on here, and that is The Unhoneymooners. This is a story in which our main protagonist is attending the wedding of her sister, and her sister basically gets a flu during her wedding along with all of the guests apart from those who didn't eat the seashells, and that is only our main protagonist and the brother of the groom, whose names I have forgotten, but a couple. They hate each other. This is a hate to love romance, and so her sister basically tells them, like, please go on our honeymoon. And considering our sister, the sister of our main protagonist, actually won this honeymoon, they have to pretend that they're married, which I think it was such an interesting plot, and I actually loved every bit of it, which I didn't expect. It was such a fun story, a quick read, and definitely recommend reading it. I gave it 5 stars. If I would have rated it after a couple of other ones that I have on this list, it might be 4.5, but I'm gonna keep it at 5. 4.5, top to 5, really good book. Next up, I have the biggest, I think, on this list, and that is The Toll by Neil Shusterman. This is the conclusion to the arc of Scythe, so the Scythe trilogy. Loved Scythe, loved Thunderhead. This was lackluster at best. So basically in the Scythe world, you have the perfect world. Disease has been dealt with. If someone actually jumps and tries to kill themselves, they can revive them. There's no death. And so you have these scythes that make sure that the population doesn't outgrow the world that they live in. And we follow 2 main protagonists. One of them is called Citra, and the other is Rowan. Citra and Rowan. And they are starting as apprentices with a scythe. And that's where the story starts. I don't want to say too much because I think the premise itself is really interesting. If you want a book that is just really different and really unique, Scythe and Thunderhead are great. This one, I just couldn't get into it. It was on my pile of shame for a long time. I had read, I don't know, about like 200-ish pages of this, and I just didn't really care. And then I pushed through last year, November, I think, and it's okay. I didn't really care anymore. It was just so slow that I gave it 3 stars. It was just an okay book, nothing amazing, and I'm kind of sad that this was the conclusion to 2 books that I absolutely enjoyed. Next up is another one that I read on my contemporary romance binge, and that is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. This has also since been made into a movie, and I watched the movie, and the movie is really cringeworthy. But basically the idea behind this is that we have 2 main protagonists. We have Lucy and Nathan? I don't think his name is Nathan. Josh. That was his name. Lucy and Josh. And this is another hate to love romance, enemies to lovers. There's no fake dating in this one, and I thought it was really interesting the way that this one was built. I do have to say that the idea of a office romance is kind of weird to me. Like, it is not something that is as accepted, I would say. Also, I read another book, which I'll get to after this one, that I just thought was a lot better. So I think I gave it 3 stars. Like, it's an okay story. I think it's where sort of this idea of enemies to lovers in romance really was solidified, because it's quite old from what I've read and seen and heard other people say. Mind you, I don't know that much about the contemporary romance genre in general, but I did really enjoy it, but not as much as others, so I think I gave it like 3.5 or 4 stars, something along those lines. Next up, let's then immediately move on to the sort of office romance that I think was a lot better, and that is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. I'm going to be reading this one in February as well because it's the book of the month pick for the Enchanted book club for February. I don't care. I will reread this until the end of days. I actually was gifted this one by Sasha, I think. Yes. And I loved it. This is a book where we follow our main protagonist who has to go to her sister's wedding. Lots of weddings in these contemporary romances, and basically she needs a date, and there's where Aaron Blackford comes in. Aaron basically decides, like, you know what, I'll go with you, even though they hate each other. And I feel like this one is a lot more fleshed out than The Hating Game, because there's just a lot more room, I think, for the building of the relationship. And I don't know, just all of the tropes and things that are in here, like the one bedroom, like forced proximity, that kind of thing. I love that. So this is definitely something that I absolutely enjoyed. 5 stars. I'll be talking a lot more about this in probably February's wrap up, so if you need more thoughts, there will be more thoughts in March because I will be reading it again, and I'm very happy about it. I'm very happy about it. Next up is a book that I have on hold, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I'm also immediately gonna name The Obelisk Gate because I had started that one, but that one was a DNF, and I quite frankly don't care. Honestly, the 5th season was very confusing. We follow 3 main protagonists, and they all have different sort of storylines, and there's different points of views. There's a like second person point of view, as in the book telling you what you are doing, and I just don't like being told what to do. Like, you are on a road. I don't care if I'm on a road. Someone is on a road and I'm following their journey, if that makes sense. It was confusing. There was a lot of info dump, and I get what the book is trying to do, and usually this would be something that I would absolutely adore, but with this one I just didn't care. And then I started The Obelisk Gate, which is book 2. Even more info dump, even more confusing, and I think about 60-ish pages in, I just thought, you know what, it's not worth it. I was actually doing a read along for this one, so that's not, like, that's peak Esmay right there, just DNFing a series that you're, you know, doing for a read along. But I wasn't gonna push myself through it. It was just not for me, and that's okay. So next up is my first horror book that I've ever read, at least I think, from what I can remember, and that's Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was also a book I read because of the Enchanted book club, and this one is such an interesting story. I didn't expect to love this one at all. Basically what we do is we follow our main protagonist Noemi, or Numi. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but she gets messages from her cousin who's saying, my husband is killing me, help. And so she, thanks to her father, because her father basically asks her to go there, goes to this giant mansion. It's like Mexican, like truly like a Mexican Gothic house. And there she's trying to figure out, like, what is going on here? What is all these strange things? And the atmosphere is really well done. I know that I was one of the only ones who really enjoyed and loved this book, but I just thought it was gory at the right times. It was fun. There was people to root for, even though the main protagonist is not someone I would personally have a connection with, but it was just so interesting, and I can definitely recommend this if you want to try out horror. Speaking of another contemporary romance, I read It Happened One Summer because of Jane. Jane really loves this one, and in this one we follow another protagonist that wouldn't necessarily be someone I love, but she is a true sort of cosmopolitan, living the high life kind of person, and her stepfather, at one point when she ends up in prison for a night, has enough, and she sends her to the birthplace of her father. So basically the place where her father is from. Her father has passed away, and they go to sort of this harbor town that's like tiny. Everybody knows each other, and there she meets Brandon, who is a fisherman. I think he's a captain as well, and she basically has to come back down to earth, and it's such an interesting story to read. I wouldn't say it's one of my absolute favorite contemporary romances I've read, but definitely up there. It's very different from everything I've ever read, but very, very enjoyable. I think I gave it 4 stars or 4.5, rounding it down to 4 because it's not quite 5 stars, because I had The Spanish Love Deception to compare it to, but I did really, really enjoy it, and I can recommend it if you want to read something different. Then something that I want to read a lot more of this year, and that is murder mystery. I just love a good murder mystery, and especially if it's a secluded murder mystery. And so I read One by One by Ruth Ware. This is a murder mystery set in the Alps, and basically what the entire idea behind this is you have a group of co-workers that work on some type of music app, and they go into the Alps to celebrate this sort of yearly thing and their yearly trip, and then one of them goes missing, and then another one ends up dead, and there's a lot of mystery behind this one. I think it was really interesting. It did lack in the ending of it. I've read better, but it was very cozy and very wintry, so if you want a winter murder mystery, this is exactly what you need. It was very interesting, and I think I gave it 4 stars, mostly because of the ending. I gave it 4 stars, but I would recommend it if you're looking for a secluded wintry murder mystery. Then something on the complete other end of the spectrum, which is a dark romance, fantasy romance. I want to read quite a few of these. I have a couple on my shelf that I want to read, and that is A Dance with the Fae Prince. This is the sequel in the Married with Magic, or Married to Magic series by Elise Kova, the first one being A Deal with the Elf King. These stories are complete standalones. Like they are situated in the same world, as in the Elf King is mentioned, but it is not about the same characters. And so we follow a girl who is basically married off. It's kind of a Cinderella thing where her stepmother basically sells her hand in marriage for money, and she goes to this very big creepy house, and in the middle of the night she hears weird things, and then she uncovers a lot more of the story, and she meets this Fae Prince, and sort of the mystery and the intrigue and everything starts. I don't want to say too much because I feel like it is a book that you really have to experience, and I really enjoyed it. It's not as good as A Deal with the Elf King, but it is definitely something that I really, really enjoyed. It was fast-paced, quick read, and I think I was done in like a day or so. Really, really fun, and I don't think I can recommend that enough. I think that series is just really like interesting, spicy, and fun. So I think that's the best way to talk about it. I actually mentioned that I DNF'd The Obelisk Gate. I wish I would have DNF'd this book, and that is Midnight in Everwood. This is a Nutcracker retelling, and we read this for December, I think. This was our December pick. We haven't had the best of luck with our Enchanted Book Club picks, but let's hope February is better. And so this follows Marionetta, who she wants to dance. Her entire being is wanting to dance ballet, and in an unfortunate series of events, her parents basically want to marry her off to Drosselmeyer, and Drosselmeyer being the original Nutcracker creator. And she then finds her way into Everwood, and there she's trapped by this king who basically forces her to dance. And while I think that the synopsis is interesting, I want to say that I didn't like the fantasy part of it. The most interesting part of this book was the beginning and the end in the real world, and everything that was in Everwood was just so sickly sweet. Everything was butterscotch this, and everything was sugary that, and everything was just so sickly sweet and so quick and easy, and I just really, really didn't enjoy it. I think I pushed myself through it because I wanted to get to the ending before the live show, and I gave this one 2 stars, I think. I did not connect with this well, and so I wish I would have DNF'd it. I didn't, and so it sits right here on, I think it's one of my most disappointing books of the year. It was not my thing, so yeah. So I have 2 more books to talk about, and both of these are 5 stars, and let's just start with the first one, which is a romance, contemporary romance as well. If you've been keeping up to date with me, you probably know which one I'm going to talk about, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. This follows a girl who is in a biology PhD program, and in order to get her best friend to date her ex, because she doesn't care about him, but because of sort of the bro and the girl code, she doesn't want to date him, she kisses her, like, one of the professors, who is a lot younger, mind you, Dr. Adam Carlson, and they enter this fake dating, enemies to lovers kind of thing, and I loved it. I loved every single page of it. I want to reread it. This is everything I like in romance. It's angsty, it's interesting, I feel like there's no sort of miscommunication thing, which is also really nice. Like, there is a little bit, but that's more of the I don't want to tell you this because I don't want to hurt my feelings kind of thing, opposed to the we're not talking about it, so now we're having an argument. And I just really enjoyed it. It's everything I hoped it would be. I didn't expect that this one was something that I would like, because I don't like school or university settings, but with this one, yes. I loved it. 5 stars, and I want to reread it very soon. Okay, and then last but certainly not least is a sequel, and that is Kingdom of the Curse by Kerri Maniscalco. You probably knew this was coming because this made it onto my favorites of all time list. This is the sequel to Kingdom of the Wicked, and this basically follows Emilia. And in the first book, Kingdom of the Wicked, Emilia's twin sister Victoria gets murdered, and basically Emilia wants to figure out what happened, who did this, get revenge, all of the above, and in her search she, by accident, summons one of the Wicked, the 7 Wicked. The 7 Wicked are part of the 7 deadly sins, and the one that she summons is Wrath, and they sort of enter this sort of weird partnership of, as long as what you need sort of helps my needs, then we'll work together kind of thing to find out who did this. And basically, as long as they can get something out of this partnership, they will work together to figure out who did this. And this is something that I absolutely love. This is one of my absolute favorite kinds of things. It's angsty, it's spicy, the characters are morally grey, the setting is amazing, I love the atmosphere, I love the people, I love everything. Everything. And I know that a lot of people were really disappointed by this, but this was just something that I sucked right up. This is something I love, and 5 stars. Cannot recommend this series enough. I need the 3rd book right now, please. Please send me an arc. I will sell my kidney for this. Please send me an arc. Won't happen, but once it's here, I will read it immediately. This is just like, it's so beautiful, and look at this beautiful copy I have. This is the Fairy Loot special edition, and oh, love this book. I will sell my soul for this book. Sell my soul for this book. I will. So that was the final book on the list. I think I've talked about quite a few. Let's see, 15 books in total. I talked about 15 books, a very long video. I hope you've enjoyed me at least attempting to be a bit more vocal about the synopsises of the books. I am trying. I really am trying. So from next month onwards, I think in February, there will be a wrap-up every month. At least I'm attempting, because I'm doing statistics, I'm excited to read, and there's just a lot to unpack. So this is probably the last recent wrap-up for now. I'm not sure if I'll get to a point where I don't read that much and I'll go back to this kind of format, but for now I think it's the last one. I hope you've enjoyed this kind of format, but be excited for the statistics. I love a good statistic. And I want to thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what are books that you have read in the past, or something that you would love to share with me, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Bye!